Hi all, I'm Aditi. I work at Edge a Node building on the graph, and today I'll talk about how to convert web2 talent to web3. I'm a product manager, and yeah, you'll hear a little bit more about me at the end of the deck. Cool, so we're going to start off with a chart. As we know, technology evolves at a super fast, breakneck pace. This has felt true for decades, but the reality is the pace of change today is accelerating and unprecedented, and never before has it been super challenging to stay current on kind of what the technologies are and what's in demand from a technical skills perspective. And so as technology becomes more and more critical in the space and as it scales, organizations need to compete and leaders need to set up their teams for success in the present and for the future from a skills perspective. And so we've all seen this curve, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but essentially like tech is increasing at a rapid scale and there's a need for talent to stay kind of up to pace with what's kind of growing in the ecosystem. More curves. So I pulled this one from a management blog that kind of mapped developing employees across their growth curve. And so the point is, as a result of the speedy evolution of technology and thus the demand for technical skill sets, the number of developers in the world actually increases so rapidly that at any given point today, more than half the software engineers in the world have less than 5 years of experience. So that's really this like yellow box that I've highlighted on this chart, yet another chart. It's not to say that this pool isn't super crazy talented, but on the whole, the pool of those developers that are still quite early on their kind of growth curve and development curve of learning skills is still pretty nascent. And so you can see as developers get more and more technical and more older, obviously the demand for that kind of skill set goes up, but the large pool of volume kind of exists on the left side of the curve. What's even crazier is that in a developer growth report conducted in 2020, it was found that JavaScript is actually the most kind of popular programming language in the world, probably not a surprise to this group, with a whopping 12.4 total addressable developer group market, as I like to call it, TAD, with the highest growth rate across all other languages. So this is pretty crazy because based on this 12.4 million number, essentially 53% of the world's developers were using JS at some point, which is really, really crazy to think about. And so from a crypto perspective, from the pie of talent that we need to convert, this is really the group that we need to address. So even like a 2% conversion rate from this group is incredible for Web3, but really the question is, how do we convert this group? What are the levers we need to pull? And so that's kind of the premise of today's talk and how we're thinking about it at the graph. And so from here, we established like JavaScript is kind of the top of the funnel, and this is, as we all know, kind of good and bad. First, the good. Based on kind of where JavaScript sits in the ecosystem, it's super broad, as we all know. It kind of spans front-end development, back-end development, desktop stuff, CLI interfaces, mobile as well. And so this market dominance can really be explained by the complexity and the variety of these apps in the market. So this is really good because it kind of spans the whole stack, but it's also bad, as a lot of us know. The downside is the large market dominance causes a lot of tribalism in the developer space. I think there's tribalism everywhere in the world, but especially in the developer space, the real kicker is that most of these devs in our target developer group are super familiar and really okay with the issues that come with JavaScript as a language. So the issues like I kind of listed on the slide, really lack of good logging on the front end. There's this attitude of move fast, break things, stuff can be broken and kind of fixed on a new release. And so there's good to the JavaScript ecosystem being super broad and super complex, but this like mindset of kind of working quickly and maybe it not being the most like technically reliable language is actually kind of a problem. And so keeping in mind that this audience that we're trying to convert is primarily JS familiar or adjacent developers, converting this talent to Web3 actually requires two major things. The first is to kind of rethink this concept of enablement by driving a fundamental mindset shift between JS to Web3 and then train people to meet multi-sided demand. So I'll get into what those mean in a little bit. The first is this like mindset issue. keeping in mind that the original purpose of JS, the by design purpose of JS, was to kind of make the monkey dance on screen, we get back to the issue that JS as a language wasn't really meant to scale and solve kind of these mission critical things that Web3 is solving. So there's, again, this attitude of move fast, break things, and release new versions. If you make a mistake, it's cool, it doesn't matter, we'll catch it and release it again. And so like I kind of put in the left side screenshots of the original kind of impetus for JavaScript as a language. But on the left, Web3, mistakes are permanent. Things are immutable by nature. The Ethereum blockchain is forever, as we all know. Smart contracts on Ethereum are immutable and cannot be changed without complex steps like deploying a new version of your smart contract, manually migrating all states of the old contract to the new version, et cetera. And so you're dealing with also like this mindset of shifting from things are chill and we can just release a new version to, oh no, things are permanent and we're gonna have to do a lot of work in order to change stuff. The other complex kind of element of Web3 that it really requires a critical mindset shift is that you're dealing with developing economies through code. A lot of legacy centralized systems kind of have these built-in guardrails to protect against fault tolerance guardrails that Web3 really does not. We see kind of a lot of the security bounty, Twitter tweets that kind of go out about smart contracts getting rugged and funds getting pulled out. That doesn't really happen with Web2. And so this critical mindset shift of how critical of technology you're building with Web3, I think is the primary kind of objective to meet as you're converting this group. Yeah, so the point being, based on the original stat I had mentioned in the first couple of slides, you're asking this audience of 53% of the world's potentially developers to leapfrog from the least reliable framework to the most reliable if we're kind of maintaining this assumption that JavaScript is kind of the most popular language right now. And so, there we go. Perfect. So that's the first lever I think of as we think about kind of at the graph converting Web2 talent to Web3, maintaining this mindset shift. The second lever is meeting kind of multi-sided demand, as I like to call it. What I mean by that is to prepare people for both industrialized and non-industrialized roles. And again, there's different levers and contexts for how you measure skills in those in each of these buckets. But for the industrialized roles, you can see here Joe put up a tweet for looking for subgraph developers and GraphQL experts to join Sushi. I think of industrialized roles as projects with large market presence looking for talent to build things, in this case subgraphs, in a full-time capacity. And so enablement for these kinds of roles comes from one-to-one skills-based certifications where you're testing people on whether people can actually apply these techniques to do something on a screen. So the execution of kind of mechanical rote steps is to kind of standardize, and in this case, how to build a subgraph, how to query a subgraph from a front-end application. And so these roles, in my mind, are inherently driven by market need. So as the market kind of scales, there's going to be a need for more and more subgraphs to be built out and kind of integrated into dApps, and so there needs to be staffing to kind of support that. And so preparing for Web3, in my mind, also means preparing for such kind of industrialized roles. The second lever that I want to talk about is preparing people to build software that's never been built before. And so, of course, there are no certifications for this, but this enablement is kind of more about problem solving and examining talent for what I like to call proof of curiosity. So for the first kind of industrialized bucket, you're measuring for proof of execution, and here it's kind of, are you a curious individual? Can you kind of workshop problems and solve things that have never been solved before? And so I think this can be measured through a portfolio of ownership or things you've built over time, which is kind of where open source development in this framework comes into play. And so, of course, the desire for this kind of talent is driven by the market for the curious kind of companies that are trying to build this stuff. And of course, that comes with a premium price tag. And so the way I think this can be enabled is through grants programs, rabbit hole, hackathons, just kind of on-the-fly initiatives that enable people to actually build this kind of stuff for fun. And so in order to meet these objectives at the graph, we recognize that it's important to, admit that new technology is scary, and to help this 53% kind of start small with our approach to how to convert this talent. And so, of course, we also want to satisfy the typical kind of developer heuristics for assessing good projects, like clear, good docs, boilerplate apps, active issues on GitHub repos. Social proof, is this project actually legitimate? And of course, like additional walkthrough videos. And so through a lot of examining approaches on how to actually convert this, keeping this like two-pronged framework in mind, that is highlighting the basics, kind of driving the immutable nature of Web3 and the emphasis of reliability and permanence in the space. Secondly, kind of also being skills-based one-to-one, but also being project-based and helping people kind of build a portfolio of ownership. And of course, having a barrier-free, open-sourced curriculum was also very important to us. We decided to partner with Free Code Camp to roll out a Subgraph 101 technical offering, free of charge and open to anyone. Launch dates are still TBD, but this is kind of how we're thinking about it at the Graph, and that is all. This is me, Aditi. I'm on Twitter. We have a website. Check it out. That's it. Thanks, y'all.